Welcome to Judge for Yourself. The Phala Phala issue has been subjected to so much nonsense amongst our so-called political commentators that it seemed to us, let's try to put the record straight. You, the viewer, deserve to be told the accurate picture and to actually understand precisely what is going on here. So let's go back, and you'll be excused to forget about this because it all happened some 6 years ago. 6 years ago, some $580,000 seemed to have been stolen from a sofa of the president's Phala Phala game lodge. And of course, very little then happened about this, save for 2 years later, you may remember him, Arthur Fraser, who of course was the Commissioner of Prisons and was perhaps, you could say, a great supporter of President Jacob Zuma. He lodged criminal complaint police station against the president, alleging money laundering and all sorts of nefarious criminal activities. As a result thereof, a member of parliament representing the ATM then basically brought a motion to the speaker to bring impeachment proceedings against President Ramaphosa in terms of Section 89 of the Constitution. Now, what effectively that meant was this: that in terms of Section 89 of the Constitution, a president can only be removed from office by a vote of 2/3 of the National Assembly, amongst others, on the grounds of a serious violation of the Constitution or the law or serious misconduct. Those are the two crucial passages. Now, it is important to understand that when this motion was brought, it was not brought on the basis of money laundering, tax evasion, or any such nefarious criminal activity. The Member of Parliament who brought it basically justified the motion as follows: that President Ramaphosa had undertaken paid work as a farmer, because that's prohibited for the president to do any other work other than being a president. 2, had failed to report the alleged corruption, the theft of money from his private residence to the police, and he'd used General Rueda from the Presidential Protection Unit to actually investigate proceedings in relation to a private matter as opposed to official business for which General Rueda was actually employed. The Speaker, at least contrary to everything else, moved quite quickly and therefore started the proceedings insofar as the impeachment was concerned by appointing a special panel chaired by retired Chief Justice Sandile Mqobo to investigate this notice and to see whether there was evidence which would justify the process of impeachment going forward. The panel produced a report and did, in fact, say that there was evidence of a kind which would justify the impeachment process against President Ramaphosa proceeding.
The rules require us to focus on the information that's presented to us. There is no room, absolutely no room for us to pick and choose who we want to call. It's the information that's presented to us. If you don't present information to us, we can't look at that information.
At that particular point in time, the rules of Parliament were such that it should have gone, that is, the entire investigation, to an impeachment committee of members of Parliament. But the ANC, using its then majority in Parliament, voted the entire process down and therefore closed any further possible impeachment inquiry. They thought that was that. But it wasn't. Although it took a long time, some 14 months later, the EFF brought a motion, an application to the Constitutional Court in which it argued that the rule which allowed the ANC majority to kibosh, to stop the entire impeachment procedure, was unconstitutional. Of course, it took them 14 months to get there, but leave that as a aside for the moment. The Constitutional Court last Friday handed down a judgment where by a majority it said the rule itself of Parliament, which would have allowed a majority of the parliamentarians to vote down an impeachment inquiry without it being investigated by an impeachment committee, was unconstitutional. It's hard to argue against that particular judgment. It really asserts the principles of accountability and transparency. What it's effectively saying is if there is a panel report of the kind that was produced by the retired Chief Justice, a committee of Parliament to investigate it in a manner in which the evidence will be placed in public, as it were, before the members of the committee, and the President and his lawyers will have an opportunity to test that evidence. The result of which would have been that we, the public, would have understood what was going on. Oh, but no, because Parliament has been so hopeless in its ability to vindicate the principle of accountability and transparency which are inherent within the Constitution, nothing happened. It stopped. And the Constitutional Court commendably has said, no, we do have a principle of accountability and transparency. And no, you in Parliament must do your job properly. And we, the public, are entitled, as it were, to be the beneficiaries of a proper open inquiry before an impeachment committee to decide what the evidence is insofar as that $580,000 is concerned. And the question therefore arose, as a result of that particular finding, what was President Ramaphosa going to do? Of course, all sorts of people said, well, he's going to resign. But what they failed to do, it seemed to me, was to actually read what the judgment actually said. Because amongst the statements of the Chief Justice in her majority judgment was the following important feature. She said that the impeachment process must go to the impeachment committee, which would then make a determination, and the matter would then proceed to the National Assembly for a vote one way or the other. But if the President took the panel report on review and it was set aside, that would be the end of the process, because the panel's report would have no legal justification or weight which would justify an impeachment inquiry. And of course, the inevitable then happened. President Ramaphosa, like any South African, is entitled to assert his constitutional rights. And what he has done effectively is to say, I consider the report of the Nkobo panel to be absolutely unjustified, to be based, as it were, on no evidential foundation or legal basis, and there shouldn't be an impeachment inquiry on the basis of such, inverted commas, nonsense, close inverted commas, his position, obviously, rather than what I'm trying to suggest, since that is to be decided by the court.
I therefore respectfully want to make it clear that I will not resign. To do so would be to preempt a process defined by the Constitution. To do so would be to give credence to a panel report that unfortunately has grave flaws. To do so would be to abdicate the responsibility that I assumed when I became President of the Republic.
And so now we're in the position where the court, probably the High Court, as opposed to the Constitutional Court to start off with, will have to determine whether the report of the Nkobo panel justifies the impeachment process. And that's important because we, the public, will now be able to listen to what the proceedings of the court are and to find out what really is the President's comprehensive answer to this very strange set of events that occurred in 2020. There are a couple of implications which we can draw from this. Firstly, we should be proud of the Constitutional Court for being an independent custodian of constitutional values. It's something to applaud. It's totally contrary, for example, to the Supreme Court of the United States of America today, which simply gives President Trump an open pass. But the second part is that it asserts that Parliament must do its job. Had it done its job in the first place, we probably wouldn't be in this mess. But at least this, we will now have the process before a court, and transparency and accountability to you, the listeners and viewers, will take place. Let me make just one further observation. Of course, there are going to be all sorts of people who are going to say, the President is employing so-called Stalingrad tactics and seeking to prevent the inevitable, that is an impeachment inquiry. Some of that comes from people themselves who've been convicted of crimes and who had no trouble at all in rubbishing the courts, which in fact convicted them. So frankly, we shouldn't really take them particularly seriously. What we should take seriously is that the President is entitled to assert his right and therefore for an independent court to decide one way or the other whether there is a basis for impeachment. Impeachment is a very drastic measure. In fact, if a president is impeached, it truly destabilizes the governance of the country, and we must take it seriously.
To resign now would be to give in to those who seek to reverse the renewal of our society, the rebuilding of our institutions, and the prosecution of the end to prosecution. I fully intend to continue serving the people of South Africa and to advance their interests. There is still so much to be done.
And therefore, what we now have is a situation where we, the public, will be able to find out what is the president's answer to the strange event of the $580,000 behind a sofa. Most people don't deposit their money in sofas. And we will be able to really determine whether, in fact, as a result thereof, this president deserves to be impeached, or whether the foundation upon which the whole saga is based really doesn't stack up. And you know what? As a result of this, we, the public, will be able to hear the evidence and judge for ourselves. Good night.